Hey guys, it's Ethan. Today we're going to be discussing how PostFX really impacts your game and what settings you should and shouldn't use. What is PostFX? PostFX are graphical settings, usually revolving around color and sharpness, that are added after the game has been rendered. You can find these settings by going to your options and clicking on the PostFX tab. When in a raid, you can click Visualize to see in real time how the sliders and the options that you choose affect the way your game looks. Now, this isn't a guide on helping you spot players better, nor is it a guide on how to make your game look more cinematic or just look better in general. This is exclusively revolving around your FPS and how PostFX actually interacts with it. Any and all testing I do in this video will be available in a Google Sheets, which I'll leave in the description. In the first clip, with PostFX completely disabled, you can see that I get 79 to 80 FPS. By just enabling PostFX and not touching any of the default settings, I lose 2 FPS and get 77 to 78 FPS. Next, I test brightness. First, I just put 1% increased brightness and can't notice a difference in frame rate. I then try 100% and even try the negatives. Altogether, the frame rate remains at 77 to 78 FPS. There is no decrease between enabling PostFX and changing any of the brightness settings. Next, we move on to saturation. Repeating the same process as brightness, we try low 1% or maybe 2%, and then try 100% on either side, negative or positive. There is still no noticeable FPS gain or decrease, and it remains at 77 to 78 FPS. When adjusting clarity, I first moved it to 1. We immediately saw a large FPS drop from 77 to 78 to 71 to 73 FPS. The FPS did not change between 1 and 100%. When using any amount of clarity, I lost 7 FPS, leaving me with 71 to 73 FPS. You should not use clarity because it hits your frames very hard. Colorfulness at any amount had negligible frame drop from 77 to 78 to just 77. Therefore, I don't think it's a bad thing to use and doesn't really affect your frame rate. When testing Luma Sharpen, I noticed no frame drop, leaving us still at 77 to 78 FPS. When testing Adaptive Sharpen, at any amount, I lost about 6 FPS, leaving me with 72 to 74 FPS. The color grading and color blind options don't work the way you think they do. When setting the intensity of them to 0, but selecting an option, you'll still notice a 1 to 2 frame drop. However, when using the sliders, you'll start to lose more FPS. I'll get more depth into that right now. I tested a couple settings for color grading, but when they all resulted in the same results, I decided that they probably all function the same. I would recommend, before selecting the one you want to use, to test your FPS because I didn't do a full intensive testing on this part. When selecting one of the options, I lost about 1 to 2 FPS. When changing the slider from 1 to 100, I lost about 5 FPS. Color grading is not a good idea to use if you value your FPS. Finally, to end my testing, I did colorblind settings. When selecting any of the 3 options besides none, you'll experience a 1 to 2 FPS drop. When changing the slider from 1 to 100, you won't notice any FPS change, so you'll still be losing 1 to 2 FPS. It's unfortunate, but if you're colorblind and you need this setting to be able to see the game properly, you'll be losing about 2 FPS from enabling PostFX, and then about another 2 FPS from using the colorblind settings. So, what conclusion did I come to? I came to the conclusion that you can use post-FX with minimal frame drop as long as you don't use clarity, adaptive sharpen, color grading, or colorblind settings. The reason I had to do this testing was because in a lot of other tutorials that I saw for using post-FX or what the best settings for post-FX were, a lot of people recommended using clarity and color grading specifically. I had been noticing that my game was lagging when I was using certain settings in post-FX, so I usually just had it disabled. Upon doing this testing, I now realized that the clarity option was the real reason I was feeling lag. In the future, I would recommend that you definitely disable the 5 options I recommend you don't use, but you can still use brightness, saturation, colorfulness, and luma sharpen, which definitely enhance the visibility of your game and make the game look more pleasant overall. Anyways, let me leave you with this. There are no best post-FX settings. It really depends on you, your monitor, and how you want the game to look. But in the future, I would really recommend that you consider the FPS that you might be losing and if it's worth it. If adaptive sharpen or clarity make the game look better for you or enhance your visibility in a way that matters to you, by all means, use it. But it's better to be aware of how you're being affected by the settings you choose. Thanks guys for watching. If you enjoyed the video, give it a like. If you want to see more content like this, subscribe. Comment any criticism to make my videos better. Anyways, that's all from me. Thanks guys. See you next time. Bye bye.